start. Who has something that they'd like to share from their conversation?
So I'll go ahead and talk, even though I'm the person doing this.
Yes, perfect. I will write yours down.
So I was going to invite a friend here who is from the non-for-profit A Turning Point, and I asked her. I said, when people come in, what are some things that they're really struggling with? And she said, no overnight shelter in the Northland for the unhoused people. That's one of the biggest things. They've got a guest house where they can bring them in, talk to them. Hey, how can we help you? How can we, move your life forward? And how can we get you an ID? An ID is a huge thing. And then at night, okay, bye, good luck. There's nothing in the Northland. That's the one thing she said was number one. Number two is affordable housing. That's everybody. Everybody needs affordable housing. We're struggling with that. She said, the other things were, of course, the food pantry that they provide. And these are charitable things, of course. But, if you get your food, maybe you could spend your money on some other things. The other thing she talked about was like a rental or a utility type kind of intervention. Yeah, because, you've got a big healthcare payment. That's what Rex was talking about. Something comes in and they can't get past it. They can't just need something to get over the hump. But those were kind of some of the things that she was talking about are immediate needs. And again, a little more charitable, but just kind of what we're dealing with.
Talk a little bit about folks that have only one car or no cars and they're spread out around the Northland. There's not easy public transportation, particularly not east and west some places. So that becomes a real challenge getting anywhere, doing anything. If anybody's tried to carry groceries home on a public bus, that's a challenge.
I actually saw a person walking home today with their groceries too. So, yeah.
Can't hear you, Jennifer.
I said I saw a person walking home with their groceries, and clearly she only had one bag, but I was thinking how many trips that must take.
And in the hot summer, then the food spoils before you can get it home.
Yeah.
On the housing, affordable housing, it needs to be safe. Because there's a lot of problems in some places that don't have rental inspection programs, and mold, cockroaches, other problems.
Daycare, affordable daycare.
One of the things that hit me early on in the conversation was when when Tex talked about developing efforts in a pluralistic society, and you have to figure out what is the common good. We have a very diverse set of opinions about what good is in this community, regardless of whether it's because of farmers that grew up independently and expect everybody else to be independent, or people that grew up in urban environments and expect a community feel to things. But whatever the reason, we have a lot of work to do to agree on what is good and get everyone focused in the same direction.
Let me say one quick thing there about organizing, if I could. I find that when you start asking people what their self-interest is, and you get them talking with each other about what their self-interest is and really sharing stuff, what begins to happen is they begin to come to common interests, and out of that common good. I've seen that time and again. So one of the things I think that bothers me up here is I see a few nuts decide to do something about the library or a school or something, and I don't hear any larger voice of the community. Maybe they're working quietly. I know how that operates, but who's representing a very broad base of this community trying to respond to what the good is here and how people see it. So that's an
My wife
important.
complains about that all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're fighting the same battles now we fought 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And why hasn't someone stepped in to help support that throughout the years?
Mm-hmm.
I think our subsequent generations have just taken it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And now someone's stepping in and saying, no, you don't need that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's also part of the challenge. During the Black Lives Matter movement, you saw people stepping up, and you saw a large group stepping up and are not normally involved. I feel like that is a challenge to get that back. I don't know if we'll ever get it back, honestly. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I think that was a window of opportunity, and people were involved because they're outraged with what they saw. They also were involved because it was the trending thing to do. It was social media. It was, I need to get my picture taken with graffiti in the background. I need to be in the crowd with a black person. So some people were there. They're like, hey, this is horrible. I want change to occur. People were there because they wanted a trend. And I think that was not sustainable. And we lost a large group of people. So we had a society, this is during the Northland, but we had a time to make change. But that now has gone by. So now it's like, how do we tap back into that and get people to re-engage with that same passion and vigor that we saw? Because I don't see that anymore. If there are rallies in Kansas City, it is
It's gone.
definitely a lot smaller than obviously what we had.
Yeah. What about others? What did you come up with in your conversation? Somebody quiet bunch.
We didn't talk about this, but I'm kind of wondering too, if we really have a lot of opportunities for like safe places for youth to do different recreational type activities. I know like the Powell Center is located, what, in
18th and White.
East Zone, but I don't,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's, through KCPD, but I'm just thinking of things like that would bring in youth to give them something positive to focus on.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about, there's still places in Northland that don't have sidewalks, even though they were promised when they were annexed into Kansas City, Missouri. But there's also, you were sharing some of the progress that was made, some of that after you actually left, that you were able to go back.
It's very slow, and also some areas got a little lucky to get some fund, or some areas are not. But if you pay attention, you can find out the needs of the people. Using Metro bus and bus stop area, no sidewalks, and it's very risky for them to go. And we got a couple of church members come to attend the service and walking on Sunday morning. I don't know how they walk here with no sidewalk here in that woods. So there's a lot of other areas, yes, like that.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I mean, you can kind of start to see how some of these things kind of all tie in with each other as well. And so this is don't be mad at me for saying this, but we're gonna roll right in now to hearing from Reverend Dr. Tex Sample, who we just call Tex as he insists.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to be called Tex.
And he's just gonna share a little bit about his background and about organizing in general and what he has been able to see over the years and how it's made a difference in different communities.
Well, let me back up just a minute. It may surprise some of you that I am very suspicious of activists. My experience with activists is that they show up when the media are there. They'll take some kind of action. It may even be heroic. But a week later or a month later, they are nowhere to be found. And what I would say in 30 years of community organizing, what I've found is if you're going to take on an issue like Black Lives Matter, first of all, you better have had the conversations down on the ground with a whole bunch of people and know that there's a lot of energy and connection there, and you've got those connections and relationships, and you've done the research, and you've met with their congregations and so forth. So when that issue comes before you, you ask the question, okay, now what can we actually do about that? So you don't leave it as a vague, general, Black Lives Matter. What are we going to do about it? I'm so glad you're here from the police department. That's so important. We need the police. But see, we need that kind of participation and that kind of working together, so that what you want to do is when an issue comes, your first question is not how do we line up on the issue. Your first question is how do we take on something there that we can actually do something about. So that how do you develop it? Come up with an effort that you've got a broad base that you can take it on and you can continue it and you can sustain it not only from the time of perceiving it coming, but then carry it through. It may take you 2 or 3 years. Some of these things are not going to be solved by painting the streets. You understand what I'm saying? I'd rather have 1,000 people out of congregations and labor unions and schools and the voluntary sector, connected and relating, and they're meeting in churches and they're having conversations and they're talking about what we can do. And I mean, and you hear that kind of building. This is not a good illustration maybe for some of you. I admire the organizing part of it. Ho Chi Minh and not Ho Chi Minh, Mao Zedong got his tail whipped in China and went into the mountains. He was there, 20 years? When he came back, he had 20 million troops. Do you suppose he knew how to organize? And so organizing, think about it in those terms. Think about it in an exciting way. It's basically listening. It's basically listening. One of the things we'll do soon, and we'll never stop doing it. We'll do it, if you're willing, we'll do a training session on one-on-ones. And then we'll encourage you in your congregation or your labor union or your school or whatever it is, begin to have these one-on-ones. And what you ask them about really is, where's your interest? Somebody says to you, I believe in freedom. Just get suspicious. Get suspicious. Find out what practices they're engaged in, if there are any. You know what I care about? Boy, I love writing fiction, but I don't do any. You gonna listen to me if I start talking about how much I burn about fiction? What about your grandchildren? Your grandchildren in the schools here, and you're worried about what's going on in the school because you don't like what's happening about race, or you don't like what's happening about gender or something else? What can you do about it? Go down there and fuss one week? If you've got that organized base, there are a host of ways that you move and a host of ways that you can act, and you'll be there when the media and all the hoopla are gone. That's what organizing is, and that's what we're trying to build here. Let me just say it quickly. We need soon to begin a launch committee. Our basic job is to raise $300,000 and get an organizer here. That'll pay the way for at least 2 years. And when we've got an organizer, I think it'll start to move pretty good at that point. Not asking you to come up with $10,000 a piece. We'll have to raise that some way, but we do need a launch committee. That's probably our next step. But I come at this as a Christian. I think the basic Christian understanding of justice is the common good. What I know about Judaism says that there are similar things in Judaism. Islam, unknown to most people in this country, Islam has one of the most sophisticated notions of justice you will find. And we don't know anything about it because we don't ever talk to, some of you do, I'm sure. We don't talk to Muslim people who are talking out of their faith commitment. This is the opportunity to do that. We've got atheists who burn about things like that. We want them here too. Okay? Building from the ground up in practices of listening and conversation and research. And yes, there are times of action, okay? But you're building that kind of organization for the common good. Let me stop there and let's go next.
Neil has a question.
Tex, how many years were you involved in organizing in Arizona?
13.
Give us one or two examples of how you kind of came to the aha of what was most important out once you put this, how did you come to, I think one was training, or give us an
Well-
example of how did the group finally decide on whatever you decided?
Yeah. Have we got time to do that?
Yes.
Let me give you 2 or 3 quick ones. One of the things, when I went to Arizona, the first thing I did was find the organizing group because I knew I wanted to be involved in it. So I think I called them. If it wasn't the first week, maybe we hadn't put our drawers up. It was the second week I called them and I said, I want to get involved because I knew that's what I wanted to do. Second thing was that I was in a church that wasn't involved, and we were 50% LGBTQ and probably the most justice-oriented bunch of activists in town, and we weren't doing anything. So, that was another piece. That's probably too strong. We weren't doing anything, but nevertheless. So, got involved, worked closely with an organizer, Joe Rubio, who now heads the IAF nationally. One of the things we did was to organize a job training program, and we got funding for it, and we were training 50 people a year for jobs that paid good money.
My question is, how did you decide to do that particular project?
Well, I'd already been involved in organizing. Oh, how did we get this?
Out of the 100 things you could have done, how did you get everybody's blessing?
Talking to congregations and nonprofits and people, and what do we need here? And they're saying, hey, look, I got a son graduating from high school and he's making $15 an hour. He's making $10 an hour in a fast food place. This is no future. We had a mother who had 2 kids, and she says, I'm making $10 an hour. We got her a job, and she started making $50,000 a year because we trained her.
But this broad-based group really held hands on that particular project.
Oh yeah, they started. They initiated it, so it got it started, continued to support it. See, and there was a group of Hispanics, got 30,000 people coming to Phoenix for a demonstration. When they realized they had 30,000 people coming, they said, dear God, we don't know what to do with 30,000 people. They called Joe Rubio, who is just a terrific organizer. They called Joe and said, what do we do? He stepped in there in a week's time. He got it worked with them, because of that kind of training, that kind of gift. By the way, we've got a wonderful community organizing training coming up. It'll go 5 days in February.
And while you're getting ready to that, Neil, let me answer it a little bit too, because I've been involved in this for about 17 years. What I have found is, if we asked everybody to put their top 10 list of things that need to improve, we probably wouldn't have one thing on everybody's list.
Yeah.
But what happens is, as we start to get to know each other and think about things and then look at the environment, we start figuring out, well, which things might get to move? Is there some motion occurring or something may be happening? And then there's enough folks that realize, well, if I get that thing off the list, then my thing goes up another notch, plus I'm getting to work with other folks and making a difference. And so, as a health department director all the time, I usually couldn't get the city council to always focus on my top 2 or 3. But, you kind of figure out where they are and what's going to move. And so it's magical when we start doing these one-to-ones and we start hearing these voices. There was actually quite a bit of commonality, and I saw a lot of head nods on a number of these issues. And if something happened as we're working on this, that one of these started to get some legs, then all of a sudden we can move. But I also can tell you that funding for that full-time organizer, because if each of us has to do this just part-time, it isn't going to take off the same way. So that is a fundamental part. The handouts that I gave you, one is on those faces of power, the other one is on the IAF model. So you can kind of read through there and get a sense of what we're talking about here in regards to having that committee that's starting to move forward to look at these issues. The other handout, that's the bigger sheet, is actually off the IAF website, where you can actually go and see all the things that they're accomplishing around the country, so that we're not going to be wasting our time. We're going to do something. But we don't know what that is yet, other than know that we've got to work on it collectively.
Well, the other thing that you have to think about when you're trying to decide what issues to work on is, are there some causal factors in here that are common?
Uh-huh.
So if you can get somebody a $50,000 a year job, it addresses homelessness, it addresses
Oh.
inadequate food,
Oh, my.
it can help with healthcare,
Mhm.
with transportation.
Yeah.
So it's not exclusive.
Mhm. The job training program's still going on.
All right, we'll come out of here for Liz.
Okay, we ready for
Yeah.
Neil?
Well, I guess the question, and I will confess to all of you from my Catholic background, confession's good for the soul. I'm a very practical person. And this is great information and cheer you on, but my question to all of you is, where does this ring in your heart? Where does this kind of, this might be interesting to fill in the blank. And as you all process this information that you've gotten tonight, if you have questions, we're here to answer, certainly to discuss more. But I get to the little bit of the practical side and say to y'all, what would you be willing to put some effort in? You're all here, as Dave Nielsen would say, you have a unique set of skills, and we've identified those in you. And I would just encourage you all to kind of consider getting involved, and if you'd be willing to put some time in, what would you be willing to put time in? What are your skills? What would you be interested in doing? And if you don't mind writing that on a little piece of paper, we're gonna collect that and do. If this isn't the right time, then it's okay to say that for you. But if it is, or you're saying, I'm very interested, or what, I have another person also, that's what we're looking for. And I just really encourage you, like I said, if you're not, we're on the ground floor of doing something that I think is pretty extraordinary. It's blossoming, and as we grow this organizing effort up, we want you all to be involved. We would like you to be, we just need you to kind of take that step with us.
Liz, along with that, do we have everyone's email and phone number?
I have a sheet that I'm gonna pass around, even if you're filling out something bigger on your own.
Mhm.
If you would just put your name and your email and your skills and interests here.
Or you can put it on that sheet and we'll transfer it.
Yeah.
Either way, yep.
And your phone number, if you would.
Oh, yes, thank you, I'm so sorry. I don't even think about phone numbers anymore, I'm such an email.
Or even, people can text you with your phone.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well acquainted with the fact that younger people often don't do phone calls.
That's right.
Let me say to you that in organizing, they do. In fact, I find it almost impossible to get turnout if you don't do phone calls.
So,
That may be a way you wean out some people.
Or personal visit.
Personal visit, oh yeah, the one-on-one is number one, yeah. One-on-one is number one.
Yeah, the commitment for this group to come out on a Monday night is important. I can tell you that we've got a lot that were not included tonight. Another pastor was doing marriage counseling tonight and couldn't make it. And another organizer that I know very well had a illness in a friend's family that they got to support. So there's some other reasons that some folks weren't here tonight that I'm sure are going to be beating on the doors later. So I really think this is starting to get moving here.
The other thing I mentioned to Tex is I'm very interested in youthful energy.
Hmm.
And we have one, we're a youthful man over here in our group, and I hope he signs up to help recruit more people of your generation, because I'd love to see that, because the way they think and the way they communicate is very different than the way my generation is used to communicating.
I think I love the idea of doing something. I was telling Gary when we were talking that one of the things that I always struggle with, because I have a bunch of ideas of how we can change technology, but how do you get everybody else on board? How do you get people to actually stop being so busy and care about something and come together and want to actually make a change.
Yeah.
So that's something that,
And
One of
we'll
the things
find-
that, go
We'll
ahead.
find some low-hanging fruit. We'll find a couple things that are almost gonna happen, and we can jump in and get it across the line, and then we'll build momentum from that. We always have.
Let me say two things to it. One of them is, that's why when you do the one-on-ones, we haven't talked a lot about that. You really want to know what the person's interest or passion is. And there are a lot of times you'll do a one-on-one, you'll say, this person's not right for us. So you don't continue to pursue it. But if you can discover that interest or that passion and respond to that, that's in a one-on-one and begin to build that relationship. That's the best way I know to do it. And that's intrinsic to everything you do in organizing.
And the one-on-one is like going out to coffee with each other and just spending a half an hour talking to each other.
That's the hardest part, is you're supposed to keep it to half an hour.
Yeah, schedule it for like a half an hour.
That's hard. Talking to you excited. So Tex, I think you and Neil were gonna kind of put a bow on this for us.
I think the first thing is we'll get these names and get a list of people who have some interest in working on this. And we probably will need to have a meeting here in 2 or 3 weeks or a month, depending on what you tell us. And I think some one-on-one training would be very important to be a part of that and move into actual training so we're not talking at you all too much.
Tex, I have a question. So I know that those of us who invited people, have had people say, yeah, I want to be there, but I can't be there this time. If everybody would have showed up that we'd invited, we'd have had trouble here. So do we have more space available
Yeah.
if needed?
There's a room down the hall that'll seat 100 people probably.
We've got a room that'll seat 750 people.
Well, yeah.
There.
Yeah.
I wanna run out of room.
Well, and when we're beginning, sometimes it's nice to have a base so that people remember where the
Yeah.
meeting is and that. But at some point, we're gonna wanna move around to other locations in the
Yes.
Northland, because that's part of
Right.
doing this work and recognizing other sponsors or groups that are involved.
Amen. Neil, you want to?
What I want to say is that, I don't know about how you're feeling right at this moment, but I'm going to guess you're saying, gee, I wonder, do I really want to sit down and talk to somebody on a one-to-one? How would that really work? This is really fresh or new for me. And do I have enough passion based upon this meeting or maybe 2 meetings? Let me tell you, I think that's where we reach out. For me, it has to be, and I've been talking to people one-on-one for 30 years about giving money. Everybody thinks that's hard to do. You know, the most exciting opportunity, I love to talk, and I'll try to hold it. Tex will slap me if I talk too long. But when I say to you, Joe, tell me about where you grew up. Tell me about what you were passionate about as a kid. What were some of the greatest challenges you had? What did your father tell you that was important for you to remember? When we really engage, we risk, it's a risk to engage to talk to somebody. If you really believe in this, which I don't know that I really believe in it other than the history of this organization is absolutely stunningly amazing. I don't want to take 3 years, but by God, if it takes 3 years, I guess we're going to have to give it that kind of time. But I just say to you, you're going to love yourself even more when you take that opportunity to risk, to try to define, to try to explain to somebody, because you know what you're doing? You're going to convince yourself through that explanation and telling somebody else why it's so darn important to participate. And you're going to love, I think you're going to love the outcome. I mean, I'm going to risk to do this. I don't know how successful I'll be, but I'm just telling you, if you do, I think it's going to move your life in ways you never thought about.
I get withdrawal symptoms when I'm not doing one-on-ones. I mean, you really, the way to connect with other people, it's, you know, I had an employee that came from aviation department, and he was a bean counter in our department. That was his role. And I found out he had started Toastmasters up at the airport, and we needed it at the health department. But I wouldn't have found that out if I hadn't sat down and been talking with him. So you just never know what the connection will be and what somebody's strength will be, and that it's they're social beings.
I'm gonna say one, I'll be 30, keep this to 30 seconds. I remember 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years, whatever it was, in the late 80s, when I became vice president for development in St. Paul. And I went out to talk to somebody about the seminary. I was passionate about it because of how it transformed my life. I was a student. And I'm talking and telling this person all about St. Paul. And when I got done, he said, well, I'm glad that you're here talking to me in Western Kansas, but isn't that really close to Minneapolis? That's where we started, and my stupidity went behind the years to tell him about our United Methodist Seminary in Kansas City. And he became a person who gave millions of dollars to the seminary. So the one-on-one may start slow, but it's amazing what can come out.
If I could add something to Neil, we've known each other since 1980. And there was a period of time in there where we didn't see each other for like 10, 12 years. But when we rejoined, it was like we started off the old conversation all over again. But in his recent retirement and in mine, we have gotten together for coffee at least once a week. And as well as I have known him in that period of time, our one-on-one, and as you said, keeping it to 30 minutes was a challenge. I have learned more about his experiences on the farm as a youth than I ever knew. And I thought I knew the guy. So it can be people you're familiar with and you have a connection with, and just kick down the door just a little bit. And I've learned that people will share if they are shared with. You don't have to tell the deep, dark secrets, but just kind of edge in. But to know him as long as I have, and our conversations now have just gotten deeper.
One quick thing too, if you have the time, Paul Turner, who is one of the top organizers with the IF, will be teaching a course at St. Paul School of Theology. Monday through Friday, you meet all day for 5 days, and it'll be from February 26th to March 1. If you have any interest in that, let me know. I've been through 3 of those, and I think it's the best training I know in organizing.
Tex, can you send that out to everybody? Because that would be.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
Well, we don't want to keep you here longer than we have committed, but
It is just after 8:30. We
I
did
know.
pretty good.
I know.
And that's one thing that's semi-related. It's more of a symptom than a correct. I'm working with the coalition, the Park Hill Community Alliance for Youth, to do mental health for first aid training for adults that work with youth on February 20th and 27th at Pine Ridge. This is a 6-hour course, so you need to be at both sessions. But this has been tremendously successful in other communities in helping people understand, first of all, how to identify an issue with a youth. Secondly, is this something that I can help walk them through, or do we need professional assistance with this? You know, it's just like CPR. You do what you can do, and then you figure out how you get the right help for them. So anyone that might be interested in that, please contact me. It's just jjones@pineridge.org.
That's great.
I think we're there, aren't we? Thank you
Thank you all.
ever so much for coming.
Thank you.